Okay, so Game of Thrones final episode. They told us it was going to be bittersweet, and I felt like that was the perfect way to describe it. Um, so just real quick, opening credits changed a little bit. They removed all of the house sigils from everywhere. There was nothing flying over Winterfell. There was no sigil above the Iron Thrones. Everything was completely blank. So anyway, that's how they started it off, and Hayley will talk about the first scene.
So the finale begins with Jon and Tyrion and Davos walking through the ruins of King's Landing, and it's really sad and somber and pretty like powerful. You see all these bodies, and my main questions were like, what is Jon thinking, and of course, what is Tyrion thinking? Like, he made, a really horrible decision to, trust Daenerys, I guess. And so did Jon, right? And it's been like foreshadowed, I guess, that she is gonna kind of go nuts for a while now. I in my opinion. But like in everyday life, we don't see that kind of stuff until it happens, and then you can string together stuff. But it's pretty powerful and sad, like I said, and it just brings up a lot of questions and feeling. So it's a good scene, and then it ends with Tyrion finding Jaime and Cersei, and it sucks because he risked his neck to save them, and they died trying to escape the way he told them to escape, and that's got to make him feel guilty, right? But I mean, he shouldn't, because the result of their dying is because of Daenerys blowing up the city, and not because they were down there or whatever. I don't know. But also, it was a little bit weird to me because how intact their bodies were. That's all I'm gonna say. It was weird. And but I guess for the like cinematic moment, and the Tyrion like realizing, and finding them, it had to be that way. But I mean, I get it, but I don't know. Realistically, talking realistically in this show, but I don't think it would have happened that way. And a lot of people are pointing out that if they had stepped 10 feet over, they would have lived. But I kind of agree, because in the final scene in the previous episode, or in the scene when they die, the bricks and stuff look like they're just, there's an insane amount, right? And then whenever he finds them, it's like 10 bricks. So, but whatever, they had to do it for that moment. I get it. But it regardless of all of that, it was super, super sad for Tyrion, and to see him like that, and to have him realize his trust in the wrong person brought this on.
So after we're done with Tyrion, down in the basement of the castle, we see that the Unsullied and the Dothraki are all celebrating victory, and we see Jon and Arya trying to like get on, like, in front of everybody, trying to reach Dany, trying to, I don't know, maybe they both are going in for the kill. And then we see that Dany shows up, and as she approaches everybody, Drogon is right behind her, and as he spreads his wings, it's just like she is becoming the dragon, and she's listening to Lady Olenna, be the dragon, and she's not listening to Viserys, who told her, you don't want to wake the dragon, or something like that. And she gives this amazing speech in Dothraki and Valyrian, and it's just absolutely mesmerizing watching her become this dictator, this tyrant. And I saw a couple of clips from Emilia Clarke talking about how she prepared for this scene, and she actually watched speeches from Hitler and other dictators saying that if you believe what you're saying, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking, because they're gonna understand the meaning behind everything just from the power in your words and your facial expressions. And I think she really killed it. Then we see that Tyrion approaches her, and because she knows that he freed Jaime, he knows that he's gonna get killed like Varys did. So she tells him, like, you betrayed me, and he tells her, you burned the city, because that was the deal. Like, if they surrendered, she wouldn't do anything, and she gets really mad. And that's when she decides that he's gonna go to the little jail in the dungeons, and he gets the Unsullied to, and she gets the Unsullied to take him down. And this is when Jon, I think, finally realizes that he has nothing to do with her. He wants nothing to do with her. This is just a power-drunken moment for her, and that he has to do something about it. So he kind of tries to reach her, and also Arya. And I wanted to point out that when she's giving her speech, Jon and Arya kind of get together, and they look completely scared, because that's not the Dany that he knows, and Arya knows a killer when she sees one, and that was just completely terrifying for them. And then we see Jon and Arya talking after the guards take Tyrion, and this is when Arya tells Jon that she doesn't trust Dany, and he's like, but she's my queen. And Arya's like, I know a killer when I see one. And I mean, the audience that's been watching Arya transform in this cold-blooded killer and this person of many faces and no one. And this is when we're all screaming at the TV like, listen to her! She knows what she's talking about! And we're also thinking maybe she's gonna go in for the kill and take Dany off the storyline. But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe those are the green eyes that Melisandre was talking about instead of Cersei's? Maybe.
Okay, so in this scene, Jon goes to visit Tyrion in prison or whatever, and Tyrion asks if he brought any wine, of course, and thanks Jon for coming to see him. Basically says he knows he's going to die, that Varys was right. He asks Jon if there's an afterlife, since we know Jon's already been dead. And Jon's like, not that I remember. And so Tyrion's like, well, Oblivion's the best thing I could hope for, and lists all the horrible things that he's done. He said he chose his fate, but the people of King's Landing, who Dany just like mercilessly killed, didn't choose theirs. And Jon says he can't justify anything, but at least the war's over. And then Tyrion's like, well, is it? Does she sound like she's done fighting? Obviously, in her big speech in the last scene, she's like totally not done. She's going to fight anybody that has anything against her to say. So anyway, he said that Varys was right, that her nature is fire and blood. And Jon gets real defensive and says, she's not her father, just like you weren't your father, and, you know, whatever. And Tyrion says that Dany slaughtered more people in that one attack on King's Landing than all the Lannisters combined. And Jon tried to justify this by saying, well, she just watched her best friend die, and, you know, she's under a bunch of trauma, basically. And Tyrion's like, well, would you have done it? And Jon, like, doesn't want to answer because he knows he wouldn't. So he's like, well, why does it matter what I do? And Tyrion's like, it matters more than anything, obviously, because he has claim to the throne, too. So anyway, he asked Jon or no, first he lists all the people she killed in Essos, saying, it wasn't just here. She killed all these people, freed all these people, but killed all these to do it, killed a bunch of Dothraki. Just listing off all the people she's conquered, and says, and everywhere she goes and kills and conquers, they cheer for her, as she believes she's good and right. Then he asked Jon if he believed that his destiny was to build a better world for everyone. Would he kill whomever stood between him and paradise? This part kind of like made me laugh because it really made me think of Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame with Thanos, and his ideal of paradise and having to kill half the world to get it, and it kind of just like made me like connect those two. I don't know if anybody else felt like the parallel there, but I guess they were released close to the same time. So anyway, definitely got some Thanos vibes from that question, the way it was posed. So anyway, Tyrion says he knows that Jon loves her and that he loves her too and believed in her with all of his heart. And he says love is more powerful than reason. Just look at Jaime. And Jon says love is the death of duty. And Tyrion is like shocked that Jon said something so profound, because we all know Jon Snow knows nothing. So anyway, then Jon's like, no, Maester Aemon said this a while ago. And so then Tyrion says sometimes duty is the death of love. And he tells Jon that Jon is the shield that guards the realms of men, and asks who is the greatest threat to the people now. So he basically asks Jon to kill her, and Jon says it's her decision who to kill because she's the queen, and he's sorry it came to this. And Tyrion's like, and your sisters? Do you see them bending the knee? He knows that Sansa and Arya are blood for Jon, and that's kind of, I think, the point that really got Jon to what he does later and to make the decision. Is this is the time where he has to choose, is he a Stark or is he a Targaryen? Is he going to side with his family or is he going to side with Daenerys? Like, what is he going to do? So anyway, Tyrion's basically like, Sansa's not going to stand for this. She's not going to bow to the queen. And Jon's like, she has to. And basically Tyrion's like, everything's up to you and you have to choose what decision to make now. So that's kind of where that scene ends, and there's obviously a lot of pressure on Jon.
Okay, well, so we get to see Dany seeing the throne for the first time. And then even though, she kind of like murdered a bunch of children and stuff, you kind of feel like sort of weirdly happy for her. 'Cause she's been working all the time to get to here, and here she is seeing it. And before she gets to sit down, Jon comes in looking all like, ooh, this is gonna be awkward. And then she starts telling some story about when she was a kid, and it's trying to be heartfelt, but it's not really, but whatever. Anyway, and then he's all like, but you just killed a bunch of children. And she's like, well, it was Cersei's fault. And he's like, okay, whatever. So then they get into this like existential argument about how she knows that she's right, and she's like, I'm right because I know I'm right. And then you see in his face like, yep, I'm gonna have to do something about this. She is totally done. And then she says they don't get to choose, which in the prior scene they said, just like in Alabama, she doesn't get to choose. So yeah, that's whenever he's about to do something. And honestly, I thought this episode was fine. Like, it tied all the knots up and stuff. And I had made my peace, I guess, with the fact that they were going to tell Dany's story like this. Because really, like, the whole time you're super stoked that all these, like, women are in charge, and then they just made her go crazy, and it's so stereotypical. And so, yeah, I guess I had just, like, been like, all right, fine, this is what we're doing. And then, so then they, like, kiss or whatever, and he's like, "You're my queen." And it's like, I mean, I guess I don't feel like there were other parts of the show that were romantic other than, I guess, whenever they first did stuff. I don't know. Anyway, if it was supposed to be like kind of sweet, it wasn't. And then he just like stabs her, which, like, I was sitting there talking to my friend and we were like, oh, this is whatever. And then we were like, oh my God, did she just die? And we totally had to rewind it because it was like, oops. And so, yeah, then that happens. And then he just like lays her down, and then he's crying. And then the dragon comes and you're like, oh, John's about to get killed by the dragon, which would have been so cool. But instead, the dragon literally burns the throne down and melts it, which I'm not sure of the scientificness of destroying that, but it is a fantasy show, so whatever. Loopholes. Yeah, dragon's like, this throne's stupid. If it didn't exist, my mom wouldn't be dead. And then he's like all sad, and he like picks her up and takes her into the sky, and it's super cheesy and weird. And yeah, and then you don't know where he's gonna go. Although somebody said that maybe he took her body back to Dario, who is my favorite character, at least the hottest character, and so I'm really hoping that happens. And then there's a spin-off where Dario goes nuts, like John Wick. It'll be great, but I don't think that's gonna happen. But whatever.
Okay, so this scene is the reason I think that people either love or hate this episode. Tyrion is taken by Grey Worm to the council of the lords and ladies of Westeros, and we see everybody sitting there. It's Yara and Davos and Sansa and Arya and Sam and Bran and other ones. Rob and Aaron with like the biggest glow up of the season, in case you didn't catch that. I actually had one friend that didn't even recognize him, so that was pretty funny. Anyway, Gendry's there, you know, everybody. I don't know the two older men's names. I can't think of their names. Anyway, so Sansa asks, where's John? And Grey Worm says, well, he's our prisoner. And Sansa's like, that's not for you to decide. And so Sansa and Grey Worm argue about it, and Yara jumps in and sides with Grey Worm, and was like, no, we swore ourselves to Daenerys, like, let him die, basically. And Arya's like, if you talk about my brother again, I'm going to slit your throat. And then Sir Davos is like, okay, let's calm down, settle down. He tells Grey Worm that he should go offers him some land for him and the Unsullied to start their own kingdom or whatever, not kingdom, but their own little whatever. So anyway, Grey Worm's like, we don't need payment, we need justice. So Tyrion says it's not for him to decide, and Grey Worm's basically like, shut the fuck up. And Tyrion's like, well, it's, you know, his fate is for the king or queen to decide, and says they need to choose a king or queen. And so Grey Worm agrees and tells them to choose. So they all kind of like hesitate and look around, and they're thinking, and then Edmure Tully stands up and starts to like try to throw his hat into the ring for king, and Sansa is like, sit down, it's not gonna be you, just sit down. Anyway, so he sits, and then Sam suggests that they let the people choose, like a democracy, and everyone just like laughs at him. It's just like, yeah, right. So anyway, that is not going to be a solution. And then Sir Davos asks Tyrion, well, I suppose you want it. And he's like, no, I'm the worst person for the job. I don't want it. He says, so asks him, who then? And he launches into his speech about their history and how there's nothing more powerful than a good story, and that Bran is the one with the best story, you know, the boy who fell out the window and then became the three-eyed raven. And Sansa's like, well, Bran doesn't want to be king and he can't have kids, which nobody asked about, but you know, Sansa. So anyway, Tyrion's like, well, that's good that he can't father children. We've seen what the children, tyrant children can do, or something like that. And he's like, this is the wheel that our queen wanted to break, and kind of addressed Grey Worm with that statement. And said that from now on, the lords and ladies of Westeros should gather together to choose the king or queen to serve the realm. And Tyrion then approaches Bran and says, I know you don't want it, but if we choose you, will you accept it? And then Bran, who hasn't said like anything until this point, is like, why do you think I came all this way? Like, knew he was going to be king, which is pretty funny. The Bran has just sat there saying nothing. You know, I think when Tyrion first said Bran, it was like, no, why, what? Fucking Bran hasn't done shit. And then Bran's response, though, the why do you think I came all this way, you know, was just, it sold me on it. It's like, he's been sitting there, he's been quiet, he's been observant, he's been watching everything, he knows all the mistakes that have been made throughout the past, he's not going to be destined to repeat those mistakes. You know, he really, I think, was the best choice for the throne. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but I thought it was really fitting. So anyway, so they decide they're going to vote. So Tyrion starts the vote and votes aye, and they go around, and then it gets to Sansa. And Sansa's like, I love you, little brother, but the North, like, lost a bunch of their men in the Great War, and we're going to be an independent kingdom like we were before for thousands of years, or whatever it was that she said, however many years, a long time. And so Bran nods, so they agree, and then they confirm Bran the Broken, which I think that name is so stupid. Can't they just call him Brandon Stark, like Bran the Broken? I guess he doesn't identify as a Stark anymore. He's three-eyed raven or whatever. But anyway, now he's king. So Bran the Broken is made king. And Tyrion's like, okay, starts to walk up. And Bran's like, Lord Tyrion, you will be my hand. And he's like, I don't want it. Please, no. It's the last thing I want. And Bran's like, well, you made a bunch of mistakes, so you're going to spend the rest of your life fixing them. And so Tyrion is named hand to the king. And that's how that scene played out. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments.
Okay, sorry I'm driving in advance, but I'm on a toll road, and it's so nice, and there's no car, so it's probably going to cost me like $1,000, but whatever. Anyway, the scene where it opens up, Jon is sitting there in his little prison cell, and he looks horrible, and you just, like, your heart goes out to him, and Tyrion, like, immediately walks in and starts talking all proper and shit, and it just sounds like an asshole to me. The new king, it's just like so detached, right? I didn't like what he was saying. They're sentencing you to the wall, like it was, like it's such a thing, and then Jon is like, there's a Night's Watch, and it's like, yeah, exactly, what? And Tyrion just says, yeah, that's pretty much where we're gonna send everyone who sucks. I didn't like that, but, and we all know that, like, after getting to know the Night's Watch, that they're super great, right? And I know Tyrion didn't mean it like that, but that's what people are gonna still think of it as, maybe. But then there was a turning point when when Tyrion says, what we did, and it's like, oh, okay, so he's carrying around this guilt, that's why he's so detached. He's got this heavy load too, right? And John's face, you know, you can just see it all over him that he's so, like, distraught. And it's pretty sad. But he ends up leaving the cell, you know, going to depart for the wall. And it's where he started, so I thought it was a really cool full circle moment. Because, you know, if you saw him in the beginning and you didn't know anything that happened, and you saw him in 10 years and he was still at the wall, you'd be like, oh, okay. But, you know, it's just like so much shit happened. And, it's cool. It's cool, I thought.
And then we see that everybody's getting ready to leave King's Landing. The Unsullied are getting ready to get on the boats and sail to North to fulfill the promise that Grey Worm made to Missandei. We see that John is also walking to the pier so he can sail back to Winterfell and go back to the Wall. And here is where some people see a resemblance between this and Frodo and Gandalf leaving at the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I think that was a pretty good scene, because we see that the Starks are, well, the remaining Starks are saying their goodbyes and they're hugging, and it's very a family-oriented scene. Also, I wanted to say that Grey Worm, he played a really important role in this series, and just seeing him fulfilling his promise to Missandei is very touching. And I liked that John is leaving back to Winterfell and back to the north, because he really doesn't know anything. We should have listened to Ygritte way back when they met, and she told him that he knows nothing. He was completely clueless the entire series, and I'm glad that he's just getting off empty-handed.
Brienne filling out Jamie's book, I was cackling, and like the memes that have followed this have been so funny. But seriously speaking, it's really touching. I mean, she really loved him and cared about him and didn't let that cloud, you know, her memories of him. And if you can search for what she actually wrote in like its entirety, and it is facts of stuff he's done, and she knows how important that book was to him. They had a conversation at some point and they were in the room together, and he told her he didn't want to be known for just killing a king. So she knows how much this has really weighed on him, this book. And, you know, Joffrey had taunted him with it and everything. So I think it was really cool to see his pages filled up like that. I'm not mad at him, and so there's that. Brienne did right by Jaime, even though he did wrong by her, and that's something that she is gonna live with and be proud of that she did, because otherwise I think it would have just, you know, kind of haunted her in a sense. She's done with it.
Okay, so now you see Tyrion gets to sit on his throne as the dude in charge, which is sort of nice because he's had to deal with all this bullshit in this room with like his dad and Cersei and stupid Joffrey, and he's kind of like, oh, finally I get to like be in charge in this room and say what I want. And then he like arranges all the seats, even though like, and it's funny because like whenever his dad was in there, he totally like moved the seat all around awkwardly or whatever. Like no one was like, maybe we should get some kind of tables that are easy to move around, or chairs. I'm just saying. And then, okay, so then everybody shows up, but then they say whatever the fuck they want because they got all the, like, randos or who's left to be in charge. So, you know, it's Davos and Bronn and Sam and Brienne. And then there's this super awkward scene where Sam brings the Song of Ice and Fire book. Totally cheesy. And he sets it in front of Tyrion. Tyrion's all like, oh, I wonder what they say about me. And Sam's like, oh, they don't actually mention you. Which doesn't make any sense. Like, what? There's no way that he would not be mentioned. Like, at least for, like, maybe killing Joffrey. And if you're any kind of historical person, you would at least note that he married Sansa and then all the other things and came back as Dany's hand and all this other stuff. Like, it was, I don't understand what the point of that part of the book was, but whatever. Or part of the show. Anyway, and then, okay, and then you find out that Bronn's the master of coin. That seems like a great idea. Then Bran shows up, which, why did they name Bronn, Brienne, and Bran are all in the same room? It's very creative naming of things, George. Okay, and then, anyway, so Bran rolls in, and he's like, well, here's a bunch of things y'all haven't done yet. And you don't have a master of this, and a master of this other thing, and this other thing, and this other whatever. And Tyrion's like, okay, well, we're working on it. And he's like, well, I'm going to work on finding the dragon. So, oh, okay. You just listed, like, all the things that we need to do, and then you're going to do the thing that's literally the biggest waste of time. Thanks for your help, King. Anyway, they go away. And then it's just kind of funny, like, interaction between Bronn and Tyrion, which is nice to see after all this, like, super seriousness for all this time, because that was, I don't know, kind of like the nice thing about the show sometimes, was like, it was a little bit funny. Yeah, and then, they say, hey, we need to, like, fix the sewers and build boats, and Bronn's like, also we need to build brothels, which is kind of funny, but I don't know who's going to work those brothels, because there's nobody left in town. In fact, are there any women? How did Dany even get her hair done earlier? Who knows? Anyways, so that's it.
Okay, so last scene of the last episode of Game of Thrones. This has taken me a while to get together. Partly because I've been avoiding it, and partly because it's really over, and I'm still not accepting that. So anyway, after the council is done discussing the brothels, we see Jon arrive at the wall where Tormund and the wildlings are waiting for him. We see Sansa getting ready to be crowned queen in the north, and Arya preparing to sail west. We see Jon reunited with Ghost, and he smiles and goes to pet him. And the first time I watched this episode, this was the moment in the episode where I lost it. I'm not even a big animal person, if you know me, and this hit me harder than anything. So it's a really emotional moment for me, and I think for a lot of people. And I don't know if it was really supposed to be like that, or if they put it in there because everyone was so pissed that he didn't say bye to Ghost the first time around. But either way, it's a heartwarming moment. So then we see Arya sails off, and Sansa is crowned queen in the north. And the second time I watched it, this was the moment that really got me. I saw a comment online about how Sansa was crowned and didn't do anything to deserve it. And I'm like, how can you feel that way? Sansa has been through so much. She went from being the little bird, like the Hound called her, to being one of the smartest, most strategic women in the whole show. She went from being a character I did not really like at all to probably my favorite character. Such a strong female figure. She's smart. She She knows what to do for the people. She cares about the people. She is strong for her people. She's amazing. So Queen in the North Sansa got me. And then Arya sails off into the unknown with the Stark sigil on her sails, which is pretty cool. I know a lot of people were speculating that there would be some kind of spin-off with Arya, which would be really cool, but I kind of read that wasn't the case. That wasn't going to happen. So I kind of thought it was a little bit random that Arya decided to go west if there's not going to be some type of spin-off, because she'd never like talked about exploring before that I can remember. But you know, okay, she's always been, you know, kind of on her own, wondering. So it was fitting for her. And so then the last shot is Jon leaving the wall with Ghost and the wildlings, and he turns back to watch the gate close before heading into the woods. And as per usual, he has a look on his face that's very serious, and you can't tell if he's happy about it, sad about it, how he feels about it, because he's just very blank, which I've mentioned before. I think Jon Snow's kind of blank emotionally. But I, before this episode, thought that Jon belonged with the wildlings all along, and he probably never should have left the cave with Ygritte to begin with. But, you know. So I think, ultimately, it's probably what's best for him. So anyway, that is the end of the show, and now I think we'll briefly talk about how we felt about it and the season and series as a whole.
So I just watched the series finale for the second time, and considering the amounts of loose ends that they had to tie up, I think this was the perfect way to finish the series. Special thanks to the special effects team that had Drogon feeling so depressed when Danny died, when Jon reunited with Ghost, giving us everything that we wanted when they said goodbye after the Battle of Winterfell. Also when Danny showed up to give the speech to the Unsullied, that Drogon like spreads his wings behind her. That's like, she woke the dragon, she became the dragon, like Lady Olenna said. And also, can we just say, Tyrion deserves the Emmy already. He carried the entire acting of that episode on his shoulder. He was just fantastic. So thank you very much, D.B. Weiss and Dan Benioff.
Okay, final thoughts. Well, it was a super cool show for a long time. Not cool. I mean, you know, interesting. And it was cool to see everyone like growing up, and I think that it'll get people to read books because everyone will want to find out what the other options are. So that's cool. And George is going to make a lot of money when he finishes that book. So good for him. I think that's all I got. Okay, bye.
As far as my last, final thoughts on this season, I'm not mad about what happened to anyone or where anyone went. I think it was all really great. Arya going west, Jon going to the Night's Watch, which is where he wanted to be from the beginning. So I think that makes sense for him. I kind of love that. Sansa, Queen of the North, whatever, that's cool. She's cool. I don't know. I'm not mad about anything. I'm not mad about Bran being king. It just feels wrong, only because it's just like, guess what, he's king. There was like not really any build up to it, and it's like these creators are like, you should have known this was gonna happen. Like, they didn't give us anything, and it just feels like this franchise is just taking a shit all over us with this season. So that's my final thought, is that this season was awful and it rushed. And I think a show that has taken so fucking long to explain things and really build stuff was over like this. Like, that sucks. So, there it is. I would also like to revise my impression of this season. I had said before that I was pretty pissed about it, and that was pretty fresh off of seeing it all. And now that I've had some time to think about it, I mean, I really did. I don't want to get it misconstrued that I don't think everybody who worked on the show did a good job, because I do. I think, you know, the actors, the production, I think the show writers, even them, did the best with what they had to work with. I think the reason it feels rushed is because of George R.R. Martin. I don't know. Don't at me, but I think that's it. Just the rushed feeling is why everybody's been so upset.
My final thoughts on the whole series. I think, considering that they only had hired 6 episodes and they had so much to tell and so much to do, and they didn't have Martin on board full time, I think that they did the best that they could. It ended well. I think it was pretty accurate what they did. They killed Danny, they killed Cersei, they did everything everybody wanted to happen. So I think I can part in good terms with the series.
Okay, so final reflections about this episode. Tyrion's breakdown over Jaime and Cersei really got to me. I know a lot of people were really upset about how Jaime and Cersei died and wanted it to be somebody like killing them and be, you know, more, I don't know, like Arya killing her or Jaime killing her or something. But I really, really enjoyed their ending, and, you know, I mean, Cersei, she's detestable. There's no doubt about that. But also there is some humanity in her, at least that I see. She loves her children. She loves her family. Even Tyrion she couldn't kill, even though she pretends to hate him. I don't think she ever did. So she's not without a little bit of compassion. Yeah, she did horrible things, and so did Jaime, but they died in each other's arms, and I thought it was fitting. Tyrion's breakdown over them was really sad because Tyrion deserved a better family. But also, you know, Jaime was the one who was always there for Tyrion, and that had to be a really big loss for him. Brienne finishing Jaime's story with died protecting his queen. Oh, yes. Anyway, Bronn, Lord of Highgarden, called that one, and that was everything. And I love that the number one thing on his agenda was the brothels. They need to bring back the brothels. So Bronn. So that was great. One thing I didn't notice that someone pointed out to me was that they called Podrick Sir Podrick, so they knighted him, which was great. They also mentioned Drogon was spotted heading east, so I always thought that, you know, Drogon was carrying her off to Meereen, so maybe he was. We won't see, but I guess, you know. Another interesting thing I read was that Jorah was originally slated to live, which I'm glad they didn't do, because I'm glad he didn't see what Dany became. As for the season as a whole, I mean, obviously it was rushed. Obviously, Dany's storyline in particular needed more build-up to make her go so bad so fast. But as a whole, I don't think it was terrible. The story was there. There were some loose ends they didn't tie up, but, you know, I mean, when you have that much time, like that little time, you do what you can, so... I didn't hate it. It wasn't my favorite season, but it wasn't horrible at all. The series as a whole, I really don't know what you can say. Greatest series of my lifetime, probably greatest series of all time, regardless of how quickly the last 2 seasons moved. There was just so much involved, so many twists, so many turns, so many things you didn't see coming. Pretty much all of my predictions. Not really all of them, but probably like 85 of my predictions throughout the series were wrong. And I think it was probably that way for most people. It kept us guessing, kept us talking. I mean, it really captured us as a whole, like everybody who watched it. Huge community of fans, and I think we're all really, really going to miss it and wait for the next big thing. Not sure what it'll be. I know everybody's on the Chernobyl bandwagon right now, and I just watched the first episode. It was good, but it's a mini series, so don't know what the next big thing will be, but I look forward to finding out.